Episode 43, Misunderstandings in Language Barriers.
Language barriers can definitely lead to some pretty hilarious misunderstandings. I remember a time when I was traveling abroad and I was trying to order some food at a restaurant. I don't speak the language very well, so I was just pointing at things on the menu and hoping for the best. The waiter brought me a plate of what looked like chicken, but when I took a bite, I realized that it was actually beef liver. I nearly spit it out right then and there, but I didn't want to be rude. So, I just smiled and nodded and pretended to enjoy it. But that's just a mild misunderstanding compared to some of the stories I've heard. I once knew someone who was studying abroad in Japan, and they were trying to tell their host family that they were feeling a bit homesick. But instead of saying homesick, they accidentally said sick of home. The host family was understandably confused and concerned. They were like, "What do you mean, sick of home? You don't like our home? Is something wrong?" I've also heard stories of people trying to ask for directions and accidentally saying something completely inappropriate. Like, instead of asking for the nearest train station, they end up asking for the nearest bathroom, or worse. But I have to say, my favorite language barrier story is the classic tale of the American tourist who went to a French bakery and asked for a pain, which is French for bread. But in English, pain means, well, pain. So the confused baker ended up giving the tourist a baguette and a band-aid. Language barriers can definitely be frustrating, but they can also be pretty hilarious. And at the end of the day, even if you don't get exactly what you wanted, you still end up with a pretty great story. Folks, have you ever traveled to a foreign country and found yourself in a hilarious misunderstanding due to a language barrier? It's one thing to ask for directions and end up at the wrong place, but it's a whole other level of confusion when you accidentally order a plate of snails instead of chicken. I remember one time I was in France and I walked into a bakery to grab a croissant. I was feeling pretty confident in my high school French skills, so I proudly asked for un croissant, s'il vous plaît. The baker looked at me confused and replied in French, which I didn't understand. So I tried again, this time slower and louder, un croissant, s'il vous plaît. The baker just stared at me, so I pointed to the croissants in the display case and said, "That. I want that." Finally, he understood and handed me a baguette. I shrugged and decided to just go with it. But my favorite language barrier story happened when I was in Japan. I was trying to order sushi at a restaurant, but unfortunately, my Japanese skills were non-existent. So I resorted to pointing at the pictures on the menu and hoping for the best. I thought I was doing pretty well until the waitress brought out a plate of raw octopus. Now, I'm a pretty adventurous eater, but I draw the line at live tentacles. I tried to explain my mistake to the waitress, but she just looked at me like I was crazy. Eventually, I managed to mime a squid and she brought me a plate of delicious sushi instead. In conclusion, language barriers can lead to some pretty hilarious misunderstandings, but they also make for great travel stories. So next time you find yourself in a foreign country struggling to communicate, just remember to laugh it off and enjoy the adventure. Thank you and good night. One time, I heard about a friend who was traveling to a foreign country and needed to buy some toothpaste. So they went to a store and tried to ask the salesperson where they could find it. But instead of saying toothpaste, they accidentally said toothbrush, and the salesperson proceeded to show them a bunch of toothbrushes, even though they kept trying to explain that they needed toothpaste. Eventually, they had to resort to miming brushing their teeth, which was a whole other awkward situation. But it's not just people traveling who can experience language barriers. Even within our own communities, there can be misunderstandings due to differences in dialect or slang. For example, I once had a conversation with someone from the UK who kept using the word fanny, and I had no idea that it was actually a slang term for something very different than what we Americans would assume. Let's just say, it was a bit of a shock when I finally figured out what they meant. Overall, language barriers can be frustrating, but they can also be a source of comedy. Just remember to keep an open mind, be patient, and don't be afraid to laugh at yourself. After all, laughter is a universal language.
And that wraps up another laughter-filled episode of Not So Funny A. If you enjoyed the jokes generated by our AI algorithms, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our comedy-loving community.